I want you to picture a quiet Saturday morning. No plans, no alarms, just the sound of my coffee maker and the relief of finally having a weekend to myself. I remember thinking how rare that felt lately, and that's probably why the doorbell startled me so badly. When I opened the door, I didn't see a delivery or a neighbor. I saw my sister's 2 kids standing on my porch with backpacks and overnight bags. They didn't look excited. They looked confused, like they'd been dropped into the wrong place and were waiting for someone to explain why. And before I could even ask what was going on, the older one said the sentence that made my stomach tighten. Before I tell you everything, do me a small favor. Support this story by subscribing and dropping a comment about where you're watching from. It helps voices like mine reach people who need to hear. Mom said you're watching us till she gets back. I blinked at him, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. Gets back from where? They looked at each other, then back at me. Vacation. That was it. No goodbye. No message. No warning. Just 2 kids, 2 bags, and a word that didn't belong there. Vacation. And the moment I heard it, something cold settled in my chest, because I knew my sister well enough to know this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was entitlement. I let the kids inside because, whatever was happening, it wasn't their fault. As they sat on my couch clutching their bags, I started calling my sister. Straight to voicemail. Again, and again, and again. Each unanswered call made my jaw tighten a little more. While the phone rang, I took a closer look at the bags. Clothes stuffed in without care. No school supplies. No medication. No schedule. Nothing that suggested this was temporary. Nothing that suggested she planned to come back soon. That's when it hit me. 8 weeks. That's how long she was planning to be gone. I didn't know how yet, but I felt it in my bones. And the longer she avoided my calls, the more certain I became that this was deliberate. When she finally answered, she sounded relaxed. Not apologetic. Not rushed. Relaxed. "Oh, good you got them," she said, like she just confirmed a package delivery. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. "You need to come get your kids. Now." She laughed. Not nervously. Not defensively. She laughed like I'd said something cute. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "It's only 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Say that out loud and tell me it doesn't sound insane. And if you're listening right now, where are you watching from? Because I want to know if this sounds as wild to you as it did to me in that moment." "I didn't agree to this," I said. "You can't just leave your kids here." There was a pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "Your family," she replied. "You'll figure it out." Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. Like she'd already decided this conversation was over. Like my consent was irrelevant. I told her no. Clearly. Calmly. I said if she didn't come back immediately, I would report the situation. I meant it. And she knew I meant it, because my entire career revolves around compliance, documentation, and consequences. I thought the word report would scare her. It didn't. Her tone changed, but not the way I expected. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She got quiet. Controlled. "You wouldn't do that," she said. "I will," I replied. "You've abandoned them." She exhaled slowly, like she was disappointed in me. "Stay in your lane," she said. And then she hung up. The call ended, but the unease didn't. In fact, it grew. Because something about that response felt rehearsed. Like she wasn't reacting. She was following a plan. That afternoon, I started documenting everything. Time of arrival. Call logs. Messages sent. I wrote her one final message, clear and direct, stating that if she didn't return for her children, I would involve authorities. The message was delivered, and that's when things shifted. That evening, I noticed a car slowing down in front of my house. Not stopping, just slowing. Then another one later. My door camera pinged with motion, alerts that didn't quite make sense. When I checked the footage, I saw figures at the edge of the frame that disappeared before I could get a clear look. I tried calling her again. No answer. The kids asked if their mom was coming back soon. I told them I didn't know yet, and I hated myself for how helpless that answer felt. That night, I barely slept. Early the next morning, while I was making breakfast, my doorbell rang. Not the casual press of a neighbor. Not a delivery. This was firm. Insistent. The kind of ring that demands attention. I walked toward the door with my phone in my hand, already uneasy. And as I reached for the handle, a thought crossed my mind that I couldn't shake. This didn't feel like a conversation. And I was right, because the moment I opened the door, everything spiraled out of control. I barely had time to register the faces in front of me before the door was pushed wider. Two people stood there, a man and a woman I didn't recognize. Neither of them looked nervous. That should have been my first warning. The man stepped forward like he belonged there, like my house was already familiar to him. "We're here for the kids," he said. My hand tightened around my phone. "You need to leave, now." The woman glanced past me into the hallway, her eyes already searching. "Their mother sent us," she said casually. She said this wouldn't be a problem. I felt my pulse spike. "You don't come into someone's house like this. Get out or I'm calling the police." That's when the man moved. He didn't swing. He didn't shout. He shoved me hard enough that I lost my footing. The world tilted, and suddenly I was on the floor, my shoulders slamming into the side of a table as my phone skidded away across the tile. It happened so fast my brain couldn't catch up. 1 second I was standing. The next, I was staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. "Don't touch them," I shouted, scrambling to sit up. The man didn't even look at me. He stepped over my phone and headed down the hall. The kids had woken up by then. I could hear their voices, confused and scared, asking what was going on. That sounded something to me. Fear turned into pure adrenaline. I pushed myself up, ignoring the pain in my shoulder, and tried to get between them in the hallway. The woman blocked me with one arm, not aggressively, almost lazily, like she knew she didn't need to. The woman didn't shove me. She didn't grab me. She simply stepped into my path and placed her arm across my chest like a gate closing. Casual, practiced, as if she'd done this before. "Stay back," she said, her voice flat. Not threatening. Worse. Certain. Behind her, the man had already reached the hallway. I heard my nephew's voices rise at the same time, confusion turning into panic as they realized something was wrong. My heart slammed against my ribs, so hard it felt painful, and I forced myself forward, pain flaring through my shoulder as I tried to push past her. "You don't get to do this," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to control it. "You don't get to touch them." She didn't answer me. She didn't need to. From down the hall, the man spoke calmly, like he was talking to pets. "Hey guys, we're going to take you to your mom now." "No," my older nephew said immediately. His voice cracked on the word. "We want to stay here." That sound, fear mixed with trust, hit me harder than the shove had. I lunged again, and this time the woman pushed back just enough to throw me off balance. I didn't fall, but the message was clear. This was not a misunderstanding. This was retrieval. My youngest nephew started crying. The raw, panicked kind that pulls something primitive out of you. I screamed my sister's name like she could hear me through the walls, through the distance, through whatever plan she'd set into motion. The man appeared at the end of the hallway with one boy under each arm. Not lifted violently, not dangling, held firmly, efficiently like luggage. The kids were kicking, crying, reaching for me, calling my name over and over again. That sound will never leave me. I tried to move again. The woman grabbed my wrist this time. Not hard enough to bruise, just enough to stop me. "Don't make this worse for yourself," she said quietly. Worse. As if this wasn't already the worst thing I'd ever experienced inside my own home. They moved fast. Too fast. The front door was open again, cold air rushing in. My nephews were carried across my porch as they cried and begged, their shoes scraping against the concrete. One of them twisted just enough to look back at me, his face red and wet with tears. "Auntie," he screamed, and then they were gone. The door slammed. The sound echoed through the house, louder than the impact of my body hitting the floor earlier. The silence that followed was even worse. Thick, heavy, final. I stood there shaking, my hands numb, my mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. My shoulder throbbed. My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. The house smelled like cold air and panic. And then my phone buzzed. It took me a second to realize it was mine. I picked it up off the floor with hands that didn't feel like they belonged to me. There was a voicemail notification. From my sister. I didn't open it right away. I stood there staring at the screen, listening to the quiet hum of my refrigerator, the ticking of a clock on the wall. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Like the house didn't realize something irreversible had just happened inside it. I pressed play. "You really should have stayed in your lane," my sister said. Her voice was calm, satisfied. This didn't have to get messy. The message ended. No yelling, no denial, no concern for her kids' screams echoing in my head. Just that sentence. A sentence that tied everything together in a way she clearly didn't understand yet. I sat down slowly, my legs finally giving out beneath me. My breathing came in short, sharp bursts, and for a moment I thought I might pass out right there on the living room floor. But I didn't, because under the shock, under the fear, something else was forming. Something cold and clear. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. I replayed the voicemail. Once, twice, 3 times. I made sure it's saved, backed up, time-stamped. Then I checked my door camera footage. The feed had dropped for a moment during the entry, but it came back online just in time to catch the figures rushing the kids out to the vehicle. The car, the license plate. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood up. I grabbed my keys, and I walked out of my house. If you're listening right now, I want you to pause for a second. What would you do in that moment? Would you freeze? Would you chase them? Or would you do exactly what I did next? I drove straight to the police station. My hands were still shaking when I sat down across from the officer, but my voice was steady. I laid everything out. The abandoned children, the threat, the timing, the forced entry, the shove, the removal. I handed over my phone with the voicemail queued up and the camera footage pulled open. I watched the officer's expression change as the pieces clicked into place. He didn't interrupt me. He didn't rush me. He listened. When I finished, he looked up at me and said the words I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath for. "You did the right thing coming here immediately." That sentence alone almost broke me. They took photos of my shoulder, documented the incident, logged the voicemail, ran the plate, made calls I couldn't hear. Every step felt surreal, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. And then one of the officers came back into the room with a look that made my stomach drop again. "They found the vehicle," he said. My heart slammed hard enough to make me dizzy. "Where are the kids?" "They're being located," he replied carefully. That pause between his words was everything. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea what condition my nephews were in. I had no idea what my sister was saying to them. I had no idea what she was capable of now that she'd already escalated to this. The officer's phone rang. He stepped out of the room. I sat there alone, staring at my hands, replaying my nephew's voice in my head over and over again. "Auntie." The word felt like a promise I hadn't been able to keep. And that guilt hit harder than any shove ever could. Minutes passed. Or seconds. Time stopped behaving normally. When the officer came back, his expression was tight, controlled, professional. "We need to ask you a few more questions," he said. "And then we're going to make some calls you won't like, but that need to happen." I nodded, because at that point, there was no going back. And somewhere not far away, my sister was about to learn that intimidation only works until it's documented. The officer didn't sit back down right away. He stood near the door, listening to someone on the other end of a line, his expression unreadable. I watched his jaw tighten slightly, and I knew whatever he was hearing wasn't good news for my sister. When he finally looked at me again, his voice was calm but firm. "Your nephews are safe," he said. That was the moment my body finally reacted. My shoulders slumped. My breath came out in a shaky exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Safe didn't mean everything was okay yet, but it meant the worst hadn't happened. And that mattered more than anything else in that moment. He explained that officers had intercepted the vehicle a few miles away. My sister had been there. The same 2 people who forced their way into my home were there too. The kids were shaken but unharmed. Still crying. Still asking for me. Hearing that broke something open in my chest. But the relief didn't last long. Because then came the consequences. The voicemail mattered. The timing mattered. The fact that I had documented everything mattered. The officer explained that when my sister was questioned, her story didn't hold together. She claimed she was just sending help. She said she didn't think anything would get physical. She tried to paint it as a misunderstanding. But misunderstandings don't leave voicemails like the one she sent me. And they don't involve strangers pushing their way into someone else's home. Child Services was contacted immediately. Not later. Not after paperwork. Immediately. Because the moment force entered the situation, everything changed. I was allowed to see my nephews briefly that night. They ran to me the second they saw me, clinging to my legs like they were afraid I might disappear if they let go. I knelt down and held them as tightly as I could, whispering that they were safe now, that none of this was their fault, that I wasn't going anywhere. They believed me. That was the hardest part, because I didn't know yet how long safe would last. The days that followed blurred together. Statements, follow-up calls, more documentation. My shoulder bruised deeply, blooming into shades of purple and yellow that made the incident feel more real every time I caught my reflection. Every bruise felt like proof. Proof she couldn't talk her way out of this. My sister tried to call me. I didn't answer. She left messages. Long ones. Short ones. Angry ones. Pleading ones. In some she cried. In others she blamed me. In all of them, she avoided the one thing that mattered. What she'd done to her kids. I didn't respond to a single one. If you're listening right now, ask yourself something honestly. Would you have picked up? Or would you have done exactly what I did and let the silence speak for you? The investigation moved faster than I expected. When patterns emerge, systems respond. And my sister had a pattern: abandonment, intimidation, escalation. The incident in my home wasn't an outlier. It was a tipping point. Temporary custody arrangements were put in place. Restrictions followed. Court dates were scheduled. My sister showed up to the first hearing looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not because she was scared for her kids, but because she was scared of losing control. When she saw me sitting there, calm and composed, something in her expression cracked. She tried to stare me down. It didn't work. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He asked simple questions. Direct ones. And every time she tried to deflect, the answers brought us right back to the same place. Why did strangers enter my home? Why was force used? Why were the children screaming for me? Why was there a voicemail acknowledging intent? She had no answers that made sense, and that silence finally worked against her. The ruling wasn't dramatic. It wasn't shouted. It was measured. Temporary protection for the kids. Supervised contact only. Mandatory evaluations. Ongoing review. When the gavel came down, my sister didn't look at her kids. She looked at me, and for the first time in our entire lives, she understood something she never had before. She couldn't bully her way out of this. The weeks that followed were quieter. Heavier, but quieter. I was allowed regular contact with my nephews. We talked. We played games. We rebuilt routines slowly, carefully. They asked questions I didn't always know how to answer. But I answered honestly when I could. I told them I loved them. And I showed up. Eventually, the system did what it's designed to do when someone refuses to change. Longer-term arrangements were discussed. Boundaries were enforced. And my sister, once so confident she could do whatever she wanted, was left dealing with consequences she couldn't charm away. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and proud and certain of one thing. Threatening me didn't work. Hurting me didn't work. Using fear didn't work. Because the moment she turned entitlement into violence, she lost everything she was trying to protect. And my nephews, they learned something too. That sometimes the safest place isn't with the loudest person in the room, but with the one who refuses to let silence hide the truth. And that was enough.